Thank you, Mohammed. As you mentioned, I'm going to really focus my comments on the practical challenges that the Islamist movements faced and how they are responding to them. You'll hear some echoes from the sort of broader and more abstract issues that came up earlier, but this is very much going to be about practical issues. First, I want to highlight the important changes in Morocco's political context that affected the Islamist actors. I will explain how the experience of the PJD, which is still leading the government, is playing out, and what impact this experience has had on the party itself and two other important actors that are operating alongside it, the Movement for Unity and Reform, that's Harakat Tawheed wal Islah, and the Justice and Charity or Justice and Spirituality group, Jama'at Al-Adl al-Ihsan. So briefly stepping back to 2011, Morocco's brief protest movement did bring about some limited, albeit important changes. Number one were the constitutional amendments, which basically gave parties a chance to try to influence the balance of power between different government institutions. And of course, in the fall of 2011, the elections brought the PJD to government. The PJD's experience in government can be divided into two phases. From 2012 to 2016, that's their first term, and from 2017 until now. In its first term, the party tried to push for a bigger role for government vis-a-vis the king, and they tried to also push a number of different reforms. They had a very ambitious reform agenda. The party's approach during the first term was driven by the leadership style of Abdel bin Kiran. He was then president of the party and prime minister in the Moroccan government. And of course, by the confidence that the party felt after 2011, which and the elections specifically, which they really felt gave them a chance to sort of emerge as an important political actor. Although this confidence ebbed and flowed as the party navigated different circumstances and tensions within the opposition parties, also tensions within its own coalition, and of course the rising anti-Islamist sentiment in Egypt and Tunisia, and their subsequent removal or departure from government. But despite these tensions, the PJD, I would say by and large, found an effective approach of a mix of pragmatism, populist rhetoric, and some effective governance, and of course, very effective messaging. It was also able to achieve a good balance, and this is key, a good balance in its relationship with the palace. It was able to identify the space in which it could operate, and it was even able at times to kind of push a little bit against that space and sort of try to carve out a little bit more power. So there definitely was more push and pull in its relationship with the palace. This allowed them to carry out what was seen as a relatively successful first term. Again, we're talking here in a context where the monarchy is very much dominant in Moroccan politics, but they still were able to have what was seen as a fairly successful first attempt. And this led to some very important electoral wins, which I'll explain very briefly. In 2015, the party came in third in local elections, and they came in first in regional elections. This really helped them expand the reach at the local and regional levels. So now we have them present at the national level, and of course the local and regional political structures as well. Again, another very significant win is 2016. In 2016, the party was able to take a higher share of parliamentary seats. This is, again, keep in mind, the context here is that Morocco's electoral system and Morocco's political system overall makes it difficult for parties to score a majority of parliament. But they were able to secure a plurality that was higher than the one they secured in 2011, and they were poised to take more control of the government. Of course, the PJD's growing influence caused a lot of concern for the palace, which was already on the defense, having realized that the constitutional amendments that they put forth and the changes in popular mood were having a much bigger effect than they had intended. So briefly, the palace, I'll just kind of explain what happened, although this played out over several months, but I'll just briefly say that the palace stymied Ben Kiran's second term, and they hectored the party into a weak coalition. They replaced Abdullah Ben Kiran, who was seen as a little bit more combative, with a more docile figure, and that's Saad al-Din al-Uthmani. Really, the most noteworthy aspect of this experience is the division that it created within the party about how the party ought to have responded to the monarchy's maneuverings. One camp wanted the party to go back to its pre-2011 playbook, where it was very much focused on appeasing the monarchy and retrenching to make them more comfortable and less worried about the party. But the issue here is that the in pre-2011, the party was untested. And the bigger concern about it was, how much of an Islamist party this was going to be. How much will it curtail civil liberties? And will it be in line with democratic practices and values? But in post-2011, the party had already proven its pragmatism and its brand of diluted Islamism. In fact, the party had, in all aspects, very much behaved like any other secular party. They even championed liberal economic policies, which many secular parties in Morocco do not support, and they did so without batting an eye. The other camp, to go back to the division within the PJD, the other camp wanted to maintain the greater bargaining power that they had gained over the years and that the 2016 elections gave them. And they wanted to negotiate with the monarchy. They didn't want to just give in to its wishes and essentially scurry away from power. They felt their voters had given them that responsibility and that privilege. In the end, the party acquiesced to the monarchy's manipulations and has remained in a weak government where its popularity is suffering, and so is its internal cohesion. This is happening especially at a time when there is more and more protest movements in Morocco. There is greater civil disobedience. You see boycotts, you see more protests everywhere. And as I mentioned, the party is internally divided. And this is basically where the PJD is at today. For other political Islam movements, the impact of the PJD's experience is, I think, noteworthy. And I will mention here the Movement for Unity and Reform, which is considered the Dawah wing of the PJD. The party's experience has once again revived the debate within the movement and also within the party to some extent about how much distance they can have with the party. The term they like to use is differentiation rather than separation. So the debate on this had evolved in the late 90s and early 2000s as, again, the dynamics within the movement and the party evolved, and of course the regional and national context had evolved. In the late 90s, the movement was the source of the party's strength. In the early 2000s, especially after the 2003 bombings in Casablanca, the two actors had decided to sort of put a little bit more distance between them. From 2011 to 2016, the party had the sort of balance of power had kind of shifted, where the party became the more dominant actor. However, with what the party was witnessing in terms of pressure from the monarchy and the subsequent ongoing loss of popularity, the Mur is seeking even greater distance. The movement is leaning more into its social mandate through its partner organizations and educational mandates, stepping away from political issues as they feel the monarchy's grip on power is tightening. Of course, all this social work is an important asset for the movement, as the population's concerns are also becoming more pragmatic and more focused on basic issues of governance. The other actor that I will briefly mention before ending is Jama'at Al-Adl al-Ihsan. The perennial question for them, which had gained more importance, is should they rethink their non-participatory stand? The Jama'at Al-Adl al-Ihsan does not participate in the political process. And in the aftermath of 2011, particularly given that the Jama'ah was a leading force behind the protests of 2011, whereas PJD and the Mur were not, And after the death of its leader, Abdeslam Yassin, the group was beginning to feel a little bit weaker, and they began to grapple with managing their coherence, internal coherence, and of course, broadening their appeal. Morocco had changed significantly, and while the group has its dedicated base, its lack of participation has kept it on the sidelines. So it's struggled to sort of reach into the broader public. There are many contradictions, and entrenched position are making these considerations are all the more difficult. On the one hand, the group says that it shuns politics, yet it argues that it is a political player. It keeps its numbers secret, yet it says that it is powerful and large. It says it's not interested in political participation, but it does have a pseudo-political party waiting. But, given all of these changes, the group still maintains that it is not the right time to engage in politics, and they essentially use the experience of the PJD as validation for their approach, but they are losing their political edge. The more they stay out of politics and the political fray, the more they lose their political presence. So just to conclude, political Islamist actors in Morocco, the PJD particularly was the sole beneficiary of the immediate 2011 protests, a position it managed effectively well until the monarchy began to pressure it. Given the party and also the movement's preference for avoiding confrontation with the monarchy, it had decided to retrench, and it really is wasting an important opportunity to maintain its popular gains. The thinking behind this strategy is very much prioritizing their relationship and how they manage their relationship with the monarchy at the expense of considerations regarding their relationship with the people. So political Islam actors are finding that after an entire existence defined by their efforts to fit in or around the political process, they need a new approach that really focuses more on the population. It's not that the monarchy's relevance has diminished. On the contrary, what the PJD has discovered is a resurgence of monarchical power, but then again, so has the power of the people, and people are looking for someone who can deliver for them on the governance level.